Hello and welcome to The Man from Hildebrand, episode 7, season 2. Today I'm going to be talking about the James Bond action figures. I'm going to give you an history of the Bond figures from the 1960s through to the present day. Because I said that when the Daniel Craig Hot Toy figure is released, I will delve into the history of the figures, because for me, I like really geeky stuff and I'm a James Bond toy collector. So it's just really kind of interesting for me to kind of delve into the rich history of the Bond action figures. Now I'm going to start with the 1960s. Now, the 1960s was, kind of the height of Bond. It was Bond mania. It was everywhere you looked, there was Bond. It was probably the equivalent to how Star Wars was in 1977. When that first came out, it was huge. It was everywhere. Bond was the same. You had Goldfinger, which was phenomenal, followed by Thunderball. Two massive hits. It kind of, inspired, it was spy craze, Bond mania. It inspired all the kind of TV shows like Mission Impossible, Get Smart, Man from U.N.C.L.E., I Spy, Danger Man, all them. They were all inspired by Bond. Everybody wanted a bit of Bond. And the American toy company, AC Gilbert, which was at the time the world's biggest toy manufacturer and America's oldest toy manufacturer, got the license. They jumped on the Bond wagon and they gave us a kind of a reasonable selection of Bond toys and figures. So AC Gilbert, they started probably in the early 1900s, and they were kind of known for the Erector set, which was kind of their version of Meccano. They did a lot of educational toys and things. They did a kind of like a science kind of set, which had uranium in it. It came with uranium, which obviously I don't think you'd be able to do that now. They did various of things before Bond, but they kind of gave us sort of a really kind of cool range of Bond toys. So they gave us 10 3-inch Bond figures, which is kind of like made out of like a resin kind of thing. They were non-articulated. You could buy them individually, or you could buy them as one in a together. These 10 figures included was Dr. No, Moneypenny and M, Goldfinger, Odd Job and Bond in a white tuxedo. And then you had Bond in scuba diving gear, Bond in casual wear, Largo and Domino. Interestingly, they never did any like 3-inch figures kind of connected to From Russia with Love. So Gilbert did in total 5 action toy sets, which were contained absolutely wonderful artwork. It they kind of depicted sort of scenes and settings from the Bond films of what we'd had back then. So you had Goldfinger's Ranch, Dr. No's Lair, and 2 beach scenes. And yes, these figures kind of came with them, plus accessories. So you had the Goldfinger laser table, you had M's desk with a bulletproof kind of perspex screen, which would have been inspired from the Man with the Golden Gun novel. You had a miniature disco volante and the Dragon tank. These came in like the action toy sets. You also then add 3 12-inch figures. Now, AC Gilbert were probably known to have been one of the first to come up with the articulated figure at like what we now know. So it's probably where Action Man derived from, G.I. Joe. AC Gilbert's believed to have been the first to produce an articulated figure. At the time, they did 12-inch figures for the Man from U.N.C.L.E., Honey West, and they did Moon McDare, which is like a spaceman, and they did the Bonds. So they did a 12-inch figure of Sean Connery, is depicted in Thunderball. He had sort of swim shorts on, flippers, shirt. Then they did Odd Job, which came in two variants. So you could get a red box odd job, which had his karate suit on, which we never saw in the film, or you could have got the black box odd job, which had his like butler's suit on and things. These you could also buy like accessory packs, so you could basically buy sort of clothing for Bond. So you could have a mask, you know, so you could put Bond in disguise. You know, you kind of have various of things. They then did a few other, so they did like a remote control Aston Martin, and they did like the spy camera. So it was like basically a camera that you wore on your wrist, which acted as a camera as well as a watch. They even did like a secret agent kind of suitcase. They also did some products specifically for Sears, which was like an American department store. They did a 12-inch figure, which was only available through Sears, and it was clearly inspired by From Russia with Love, and it was probably the only toy figure that they did which could be connected to that film. And it was basically James Bond, Sean Connery, with a pinstripe suit, bowler hat, an attaché case, and a leg that kicked because he was wearing the poison bladed shoe. Sears also did the World of 007, which you can still get, and it was basically the action toy sets, but like on a round kind of sort of movable sort of disc, where you had all the kind of like round discs split into four, and you have four quarters which depicted the scenes which was in these action toy sets, and you basically had the figures and stuff loose on that. Sears also did the 007 slot car sort of race set, which is basically like Scalextrics. So 1965, the Corgi's Aston Martin DB5 was the toy of the year. That sold, was a huge sellout. Sears road race set was the huge toy of the year for 1966, but there was a lot of faults. A lot of annoyed parents, a lot of disappointed children were returning this product because there was a lot of faults and stuff, and this kind of then led to Gilbert becoming bankrupt, which was an absolute shame because they had such a huge kind of lineup of what they was wanting to produce, but they never did because they went bust. They was wanting to produce 12-inch figures of Dr. No, Largo, Goldfinger. There was even like a prototype, a concept of like an 18-inch long Disco Volante, battery powered. You know, and I think they had some more sort of hand puppets in line. For a collector and for a Bond fan, it's just the what ifs, and I just think, just imagine all this stuff. You know, it'd have been so cool to have had an 18-inch Disco Volante and have had more figures. You know, and it's kind of a shame because I feel that if Gilbert was around that little bit longer, just imagine the toys that they would have given us for You Only Live Twice. You know, they'd have given us the volcano, you know, the volcano lair, which another company did do, but just imagine a Gilbert volcano lair. Just imagine, you know, Bond, you know, I mean, they might have even sort of tagged on to the Moon McDare series and gave us Bond in the spacesuit. They might have, you know, gave us the Bird 1 space capsule. You know, there's so much potential that they could have done with that. And, you know, I think You Only Live Twice, it was a shame because no other toy manufacturer as such kind of really tapped onto it. And yet that's a film where you could have had so much potential. But sadly, due to the road race set, Gilbert went bust. And ironically now, you can still get the road race set. And a lot of people saying that it's actually quite easy to mend. I mean, I think they do sell for a lot of good money now. So yeah, the 1960s, AC Gilbert, they were the people. You know, they you know, had a huge range of Bond figures, and I've still got quite a few of them, as you can see from the pictures. But yeah, absolutely amazing array. By the time You Only Live Twice came out, Cecil Coleman then came on board and gave us a 12-inch figure. as far as I know, it was the James Bond in the Commander's uniform. There's been things appearing that they may have done an Aki figure and a Miss Moneypenny figure. I don't know if they were like custom made or if it was like probably a figure from another line. I mean, Cecil Coleman, I know they did a range of Thunderbird marionette puppets at the time. The figures for 1970s was, of course, only Moonraker. So Mego Toys, which was quite a big toy manufacturer again at the time in America, they stupidly turned down the license to produce the Star Wars range, which kind of went to Kenner, and I'm sure, yeah, Mego soon kind of was kicking themselves. But yeah, Mego at the time, they did sort of like Superman figures, Batman figures, Spider-Man figures, and yeah, they basically got on to the Bond range, and they gave us 4 12-inch figures, which was Drax, Dr. Holly Cudhead, Jaws and Bond. The Jaws figure was known to develop a green head due to the because he had metal teeth, so the metal in his mouth kind of reacted to the plastic. These can apparently get cleaned up. I mean, the pack, I mean, I see them for about £150. One day I would like to get them, and they have been on my list for things to get. Because I just think they look really cool. They did do, I believe, a deluxe edition of James Bond with space kind of backpack. Interestingly, Bond is kind of in the silver Marines kind of suit and not in the yellow suit as we know in the film. They also add in line, which was like the first, well, probably another lost toy line. They also had like plans to develop a range, well, a series of 3 3/4 inch figures. We're not too sure what the lineup would have been, but we would have suspected it would have been Drax, Bond, Jaws, and Holly Cudhead. Might have been a few goons, I don't know. With some vehicles, so they had like the Moonraker space shuttle, the Bond's kind of boat / hang glider, and some sort of helicopter which was taken straight from Mego's Batman range. These, for some reason, this particular toy line didn't materialise, and it's believed to have been something to do with some licensing issues between sort of Mego and Eon, which then led to Mego's bankruptcy and demise in 1982. Comes to the 1980s, nothing, we had no sort of action figures as such. We did have Little Ed Soldiers range of sort of various of Bond sort of characters, which I believe was like kind of 2-inch. They also give us the Aston Martin convertible Volante and the Bentley Blower, as seen in the novels. This, of course, was to coincide with the Living Daylights because they also supplied the Little Ed Soldiers for Brad Whittaker. These Little Ed Soldiers you can still get. I believe they probably are, you know, kind of rare. They also did like a chess set as well, which is pretty cool. Fast forward to the 1990s, it became a bit more interesting because a lot more companies were kind of tagging along. So the 90s started off with Ertl, who I only know and associate with Thomas the Tank Engine because when I was a kid, I used to be into Thomas the Tank Engine and their toys were manufactured by Ertl. So I kind of only associate Ertl with Thomas the Tank Engine. But Ertl did also release a range of sort of probably 3-inch, 3/4 inch articulated figures from James Bond Jr., which of course was kind of the like brainchild of Michael Wilson and was like sort of the stopgap between License to Kill and GoldenEye. Within this, I mean, I'm not too sure how many figures were part of this series, but there were some vehicles and stuff included. You can still pick them up off eBay and you can still see these figures on the toy fairs. I mean, the packaging, they were sort of in the typical kind of card back blistered window packaging. Fast forward to about 96 time, a Japanese company called Dragon released a sort of model kit of Bond, as seen as GoldenEye, as well as like a statue of Bond from GoldenEye. These scaled at 1:9, and then 97, when Tomorrow Never Dies came out, they gave us again a couple of statues of measured again at 1:9 scale, sort of Pierce Brosnan and James Bond, one in a black dinner jacket, another in a white dinner jacket, which obviously in Tomorrow Never Dies he never wore. And then they kind of did a really kind of bizarre sort of concept, because they did what they call like an exploded kind of figure, which was basically you had sort of a figure of Bond and Wei Lin, but there was exploded, so the limbs were sort of like detached from the torso. I had some. I think I might have got rid of some. I might have one still down there. What the idea of that was, I don't know, but it's just very strange. I mean, when you look at it, it just seemed a bit odd. The American company Exclusive Toy Products, they then did kind of like I suppose like a vast range of Bond figures, really. They did 3 figures for Tomorrow Never Dies, which was Bond in his kind of naval uniform, commander's uniform, with Wei Lin and Elliot Carver, and these all came in like a kind of like I don't know how to, just like a semicircular kind of box with a window in, and they had like Tomorrow Never Dies written on the top. They also did Dr. No as well, so they did a set of 3 Dr. No figures, which included James Bond, as seen in Crab Key, so it was him with his blue shirt and blue trousers, Dr. No and Honey Rider. A year later they went and produced, I think, 7 sort of Bond girls, all in the same kind of packaging. Now I can remember, I was probably 13 at the time, and I was just thinking about this the other day, that I know there's a shop, the shop's still there, there's Forbidden Planet, but I'm sure in my hometown there was another one called Another World, and I don't know if that belonged to a chain or if that was a one-off, but I remember going into Another World and seeing these particular Bond figures, and for a long time sort of contemplating, thinking, well, if I get them, people are going to be asking questions, because I was like a 13-year-old who was single, had no girlfriend, and had like dolls. Now I could probably get away with it because I'm now married, but I still see this set and I just think, nah, it's just, I haven't got the room. But anyway, this series of Bond girls included Tracy, Mrs. Bond, Pussy Galore, Jill Masterson painted in gold, Xenia on the top, Honey Rider, Solitaire, and Pussy Galore with a bikini on, which is kind of sort of interesting. So yeah, these were all in like kind of like a purple kind of packaging, again the same as the Dr. No and the Tomorrow Never Dies ones. And then by sort of 98 again, they kind of changed the style of the packaging, because they then gave us the Spy Who Loved Me set, which I believe the figures are probably exactly the same. They're probably about 6 inches, to be fair, and they're probably exactly the same size as what the Tomorrow Never Dies and the Dr. No and the Bond girl figures were. But the packaging in this case is now changed. Instead of being like sort of a tube-like half circle box, it's kind of typical carded back blister packaging. The Spy Who Loved Me range included Bond in his pre-title jumpsuit, Jaws, Anya Amazova. They then did a Goldfinger set as well, which was Bond in his white dinner jacket, Odd Job, and Goldfinger. 1998 was also when Hasbro came along and gave us some Action Men. Now these, I have very fond memories of these particular, because for my 12th birthday, I think I was given the limited edition Thunderball Action Man. To this day, I've still got it. It still has never been out of the box. And I just love it because it was just the generic Action Man, but in sort of the scuba diving outfit as seen in Thunderbolt. The packaging with brilliant artwork. I don't know who the artist was, but it was clearly inspired by Robert McGuinness, who did the original artwork back in the day. You had like a little bit of film as well, so you could a sample of a film. Whether or not that was original film, I don't know, but it came with what they call like a 35mm film. And I discovered that they did Tomorrow Never Dies as well. They did a figure with Tomorrow Never Dies, again with brilliant artwork. This was 12-inch articulated, limited edition. Again, it was basically Action Man as we know it, but with the Bond attire. And then they did Spy Loved Me with the yellow pre-title ski suit, jumpsuit. And then they did the GoldenEye figure as well, all with absolutely cracking artwork. It came in a box where the lid kind of opened out. It all came with a 35mm clear film. Yeah, absolutely beautiful. And then around 1999 time, they released the final two Bond figures of their range and gave us sort of a You Only Live Twice figure, which had Bond in his naval kind of uniform, similar to the Cecil Coleman figure of the 60s. The only thing with You Only Live Twice is the box was, again, totally different. Now become an octagonal kind of window box, as opposed to the sort of open kind of flap box that we got on the previous four figures. The artwork on it was still good, but I can't help but think what it would have been like if we'd got the same kind of box. They then released the final Action Man, which was from The World's Not Enough. And I mean, this is clearly kind of like sort of at the time in trying to get this figure out in time for the film, because the packaging is, I mean, the packaging is the same as the You Only Live Twice one, but the artwork, what artwork? Zilch artwork on that whatsoever. It just contained like strips of like illustrations and storyboards. It was clearly rushed, and I suppose like anything, it was down to, you know, cost. You know, it was obviously cheaper to produce this kind of packaging and still charge exactly the same amount of money as you would have done on the previous four figures. But yeah, I mean, all of them are great figures. I've got the set. It's just the packaging on the last two figures, You Only Live Twice and The World's Not Enough, was extremely questionable. You then, talking of Mattel, they then went and did a limited edition Barbie and Ken figure, I believe to coincide with the 40th anniversary. Also in 1998 seemed a brilliant kind of period for kind of Bond figures, because Japanese company Medicom released three Bond figures, which was part of their sort of kind of real action hero range. So they had Sean Connery, James Bond, as seen from Dr. No, and they had Pierce Brosnan as seen from Tomorrow Never Dies. Plus, there is a third one, which is extremely rare, and not many people know about it, and not many people talk about it. But I did actually see one the other day on the socials, and it was the Roger Moore Medicom James Bond figure, as seen in Octopussy. They had the original Dan Guzzi artwork kind of on the box, and yeah, no, I don't think many people, I think that's very rare. I mean, you look on eBay, you don't get it. You get the Pierce and you get the Shawns, and I go to toy fairs, you see a Pierce and Shawn, but you do not see the Roger Moore one. So I don't know if it's because there wasn't many made. But Medicom, I only discovered the other day, are the people behind the Brick Bears, which are on the 007 store. I mean, those Brick Bears, they are absolutely vile. I'm not going to have one. So yeah, so that is kind of the action figures of the 90s. And yes, Corgi released a range of die-cast figures to coincide with the Corgi Icon range. they did 2 dioramas. They did a Dr. No diorama, which I suppose is probably kind of similar to the Gilbert action set. You know, you had, you know, Dr. No, Bond and Honey Rider standing in a sort of resin kind of die cast of his lair with the great big aquarium behind him. And then they did a diorama from The Was Not Enough to accommodate the BMW Z8, which Corgi obviously did. It's just a shame that they never took it further. I mean, again, there's so much potential. So yeah, that's kind of the Bond figures of the 90s. In the 2000s, it gets even more interesting, because go to 2004 and Sideshow Toys released kind of quite a large range of figures, and these again were 12-inch articulated figures. These, you know, you had Dr. No, you had James Bond, you had Odd Job, you had James Bond as seen in Thunderball from the underwater sequences with his proper jet-propelled scuba pack. You had George Lazenby James Bond, you had Telly Savalas as Blofeld, you had Roger Moore from Live and Let Die, you had Mr. Teehee, you had Bond, you had Scaramanga, you had Jaws, you had Q, you had Bond as seen in Moonraker with his yellow spacesuit, you had Timothy Dalton from License to Kill with Sanchez, you had Pussy Galore, you had, you know, Bond in GoldenEye, Alec Trevelyan from GoldenEye, Xenia on the top, Whalin, Bond in Die Another Day, Zhao in Die Another Day. You had a vast range of figures, and yes, I had all of these, but about 10 years ago I sold them because they did actually take up a lot of space. That was the thing. But again, Sideshow, I mean, these were at the time reasonably priced. These were like £40, and again, they came in like sort of box-like packaging where you just opened up, similar to the first 4 Action Men kind of figures. Later on, they did what they call the Legacy Collection, which I believe they did 5. So it was basically like kind of like leftover sculpts, but they just redressed them. So you had sort of Bond from Goldfinger, Roger Moore from For Your Eyes Only, maybe. You had Timothy Dalton, you had Pierce Brosnan, you had George Lazenby. So you had the Legacy Collection, and then they did the Premium Collection, which was like a little bit bigger figures, I think, but they were like kind of statues, kind of resin based. They were much more expensive. There's probably about £200 compared to the £40 mark. You had Sean Connery, Roger Moore, Pierce Brosnan. I never got them. But yeah, I think they kind of lost the license around 2006, and I was kind of honestly expecting them to do Daniel Craig, and they never did. And them to this day were the first company and the only company to have done all of the Bond actors and to have done other characters as well. 2008 we had another lost toy line. Corgi then, I believe, were bought out by Hornby. They wanted to do a couple of like 1/18 scale vehicles, Bond vehicles. They had an idea of releasing both an Aston Martin DB5 and a Lotus Esprit diecast model, but sliced in half. I think this would have been about £500 worth, and it basically sliced in half or placed on a mirror. So when you look at it, it looks like it's a full kind of shebang, but when you turn it around, you actually see all the mechanisms, you know, all the workings of the car, because obviously the car had the injector seat, had all the, you know, springs and stuff to, you know, kind of fire all these kind of weapons. That never materialised. They also had sort of a range of figures, again, action figures, statues, busts, and I was thinking, oh god, this is going, I mean, this was around the time as Quantum of Solace as well. I was thinking, wow, this is going to be brilliant, and we're going to bond it out. For a long time I have wanted 3 3/4 inch Bond figures, you know, very much like, I mean, before Bond I was massively into Star Wars, so yes, I had the figures, and to this day I kind of wished I kept the packaging. If I had the money and if I was at the space, I'd probably go for the Star Wars vintage collection because of the packaging. So I'm just waiting for the day we actually get Bond 3 3/4 inch figures. I kind of think it's on the horizon. 2009, Mattel once again was back on the Bond circuit, because they then gave us a range of 5 Barbie figures. This was part of the series which was Bond Loves Barbie, and was kind of branded under the Mattel's Black Label series. So these 5 figures was released in 2 waves. We had 3 figures that was released in 2009, which was Pussy Galore, Jinx and Honey Rider. 2010 saw the release of Octopussy and Solitaire. Personally, I actually much prefer the packaging of Octopussy and Solitaire. Now, these, I don't see them as often as I used to at toy fairs. They may be on eBay, but they have always kind of appealed to me a little bit. I would still happily get them, and I would easily get away with it because my wife would also encourage me to buy them, because she's a bit of a Barbie buff herself. But I do actually have a bit of a thing for Barbie, not sexually, but it's just I find the history interesting. Like over the 70 plus years, it just fascinates me how the figure has evolved, and it is very much like the James Bond films. It just naturally evolves round time. And not too sure how many Barbie figures you've got, but I'm sure there's a load out there. And again, the boxes appeal to me. Of course, about 10 years previous to this, Mattel had gave us the Action Man range of 6 figures. They've now once again come back and gave us 5 figures. Moving on to 2018, this was when the British company Big Chief Studios then gained the license to produce Bond figures. These were retailing at about £200. They again was about 12-inch articulated figures. The first sort of wave they did was a Goldfinger set, which featured James Bond, Oddjob and Goldfinger. And they also came with like a bit of a kind of display sort of diorama kind of set. And then this was followed by the Live and Let Die kind of set, which was Roger Moore's James Bond, Baron Samedi and Solitaire. And then they went on to do Dr. No and Sean Connery James Bond. Whether or not they had Honey Rider planned for that series, I don't know, because sadly, about 2023, Big Chief went into liquidation. This was due to the COVID pandemic, which was absolutely heartbreaking. I mean, I didn't actually have any of these figures because at £200 they were a little bit expensive, but I kind of always said that with this, as much as a completist and collector I am, I would have to really kind of be very selective and kind of narrow it down. So, for example, Thunderball was my favourite Sean Connery Bond film, so if they did something from Thunderball, I would probably get that Thunderball figure. If they did something from For Your Eyes Only, I would have probably got something from that. If they did something from License to Kill, probably something from that, or The World's Not Enough, or Skyfall. Or, of course, George Lazenby, because On Majesty's Secret Service was the best film that he did. But yeah, it was, and with these, the detail was just second to none. They was a vast improvement from the Sideshow Toys. These were kind of, and like even like the skin and the texture, especially on Oddjob, was just, again, absolutely outstanding. So I kind of feel that £200 was definitely worth the money. And yeah, it was just an absolute shame, because I actually got talking to somebody from Big Chief when I attended a Jerry Anderson exhibition back in 2019. And they were saying that they had basically sort of got all the like head sculptures kind of prepared. So they'd already done Timothy Dalton, they'd done George Lazenby, they did Desmond Llewellyn, they did Donald Pleasance, they did Robert Shaw. It was just a matter of Eon basically giving them the green light and telling them to, it's okay to go ahead. Donald Pleasance one would have been interesting, because I think when he appeared in Halloween, They did some figures of Donald Pleasance, which without his estate's permission, that then obviously caused issues, and that's probably why we never got a Donald Pleasance Blofeld figure. So if Big Chief was around a little bit longer or still with us, just hope that they could have like ironed those legal issues out, then we could have eventually got the Donald Pleasance figure. It's probably similar with Robert Shaw. We never got anything, any Red Grant figure. Funko Pops, they, again, I don't think I've got the license anymore. I think around 2018, 2019, they had the license to do a load of Bond figures. Can't remember from the top of the head how many they did. But again, I really liked them. You know, they were £12 each. They weren't breaking the bank. If you wanted to keep them in the box, you could do. I didn't. I just had them kind of loose. But they're kind of really small. They don't take up any space. And again, it's like so much potential. You know, you could have done so. I mean, again, we could have had a George Lazenby. We could have had a Timothy Dalton. But we never did, because they was told to really kind of eventually focus on the newer stuff. Even though they did give us Connery, they did give us figures from Goldfinger. You know, they could have given us Dr. No with the black, you know, with the metal hands. They could have given us Rosa Klebb with the shoe. They could have given us Bond on the jetpack from Thunderball. Again, you know, I mean, they could have given us Winton Kid. There's so much they could have done. They could have given us Charles Gray's Blofeld. I mean, the Baron Samedi one was really cool. I mean, the last one they did was the Moonraker one. Again, in a silver spacesuit, not in the yellow jumpsuit, it's in a silver spacesuit. And then they did the No Time to Die kind of range of figures. This is where it gets a little bit interesting, because a few weeks ago on Factory Entertainment, they put a survey out asking, you know, what sort of series, what franchise would we like to see figures from. I, of course, ticked James Bond. Now, whether or not they'll get enough votes for James Bond, I don't know. Because just before Big Chief went bust, they actually released, again, 3 3/4 inch figures of the Jerry Anderson sort of show. So I've got a friend who's massively into Thunderbirds. He started collecting sort of Thunderbird, a bit like how I collect Bond, he's collecting Thunderbirds. And I'm kind of guiding, you know, he wanted figures. And I said, well, the figures you want to go for is a Factory Entertainment. I mean, Big Chief, sorry, but the packaging is absolutely awesome. And with Big Chief also doing a couple of the 3 3/4 inch Thunderbird figures, and the artwork is just absolutely brilliant. And Big Chief have gone bust. I thought, damn, because I thought, you know, if they're doing figures of Bond, they're probably going to do smaller figures of Bond. With them gone bust, that's never going to happen. And then in a roundabout way, Jerry Anderson is still producing, or there's still a new series of 3 3/4 inch figures. And I asked the question, so if Big Chief have gone bust, who's then took over, you know, manufacturing these new figures? And it comes back as it was Master Replicas. Now, Master Replicas, they started out as doing basically prop replicas for Star Wars. You know, they used to do lightsabers, the lasers, the blasters and all that. And they was then part, or became part briefly, of Corgi or Hornby about 2008, because when Corgi had announced this new Bond line, Master Replicas was part of it, and they were going to make prop replicas. Obviously, that never happened. That then went to Factory Entertainment. So, in terms of 3 3/4 inch figures, I think we will get them. Thank you very much for watching this video, and please like and share. But I would like to just do a bit of a disclaimer that for those who follow me and for those who know me, I'm sure you would know which photographs are mine because you'd have seen them on the socials. The other pictures which aren't mine is credited to Google. I don't know exactly who they belong to. I just put into Google and an image came up. So yeah, but yes, I mean, I said that once the Hot Toys figures of Daniel Craig is released, I will go into a bit of a history of the history of the James Bond figures, and I have done. I hope you've enjoyed that. So yeah, in terms of what to expect in the future, we just wait and see. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Like and share. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back next time. When that next time will be, I don't know. But thanks for listening, and take care. Cheerio.